symbol.
Can this last forever? This is a question the fanbase of the MCU has had to ask themselves over the past few years. What makes the answer so interesting is that no one really knows. The popular opinion is that the MCU died after Avengers Endgame, which was the incredible finale to an 11-year storyline with dozens of compelling characters. It was an event like nothing the world had ever seen. Magic like nothing anyone had ever experienced. The MCU caught lightning in a bottle and capitalized on it with Endgame, and the results speak for themselves, with Endgame becoming the #1 highest grossing film in history. Unfortunately, Marvel failed to do one of the most important things: plan ahead. After so many years of one plotline, I feel the executives of Marvel felt that Endgame was the finish line, which resulted in almost every plotline being tied together by the end of the movie. Endgame left very little uncertainty and didn't leave any cliffhangers. It simply left a question: what's next? We've all heard the phrase, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. It's obvious that after Endgame, Marvel realized that they were in trouble. With such a high point in the MCU behind them, a pressure to top it or at least reach its level was a big priority. One way Marvel planned to capitalize on the success of Endgame was by mass producing content. On paper, this seems like a good idea. More content, more money, higher customer satisfaction. Marvel forgot the biggest factor that led to the success of Endgame: a plot. Over half of Phase 4 had nothing to do with each other. Marvel only produced these projects to capitalize on the Marvel craze at the time. They forgot to plan what the MCU was going to be.
And I don't even know where it's going. I just hope I find it along the way.
This is one reason I feel Marvel should have taken a few years break after the satisfying finale of Endgame. This would show fans that Marvel does genuinely care about what they make, and would show that the stories they are making and their fans are their top priorities. This break would give them time to build off of the storyline of phases 1 through 3. It would give ample time to create something even greater than Endgame. Instead, they immediately put out a bunch of movies that no single soul on Earth cared about. One of the most random of which was Black Widow. Spoiler alert, in Avengers Endgame, Black Widow dies. It was a satisfying end to her character, and everyone expected that to be the last of her. So imagine the surprise when a Black Widow solo movie was released 2 years later. It was an obvious cash grab, and it was obvious that Marvel had no ideas for what they wanted to do. It was the moment that a lot of MCU fans began to jump ship. Hating on Marvel became the popular thing to do. Recently, Marvel released a statement saying they'll be reevaluating and focusing on quality over the quantity. Marvel finally addressed that they've been focusing on quantity. It's obvious. Phase 4 alone had 17 total movies and shows, while the first 3 phases combined only added up to 23. They nearly made more projects in 2 years than 11 years combined of Marvel storytelling. This led to an exhausting oversaturation of Marvel. Seeing a new Marvel movie released in theaters used to be very exciting. It was an event. There weren't many each year. But now, seeing a new Marvel project just makes you sigh and say, I guess I have to go see that. At this point, only the most die-hard of Marvel fans remain, hanging on to a thin strand of hope for the MCU. I think it's important to first take a step back and understand exactly why Marvel was so successful before we can analyze why it failed over the last few years. I think the biggest problems can be boiled down to a few short problems, these being quality, quantity, politics, and a lack of direction. The early days of Marvel didn't need to worry about any of these things. With a limited budget on a very new genre of movies, they had to be methodical and careful. They needed to be sure that the projects were the best they could be before releasing. Time, care, and attention was spent on the first few phases of the MCU. If the first stages of Marvel failed, it would all be over for good. You cannot deny that the MCU was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. It was new and it was different. Each character was very individualized and had their own introduction at specific times through the phases of the films. And above all else, the Marvel movies were simply fun. One reason I feel the DCEU hasn't taken off is because of how dark and dull the films are. No one likes to watch movies where the characters are constantly frowning and the weather is always cloudy and rainy. Superhero comic books are the most insane and dumb and mind-numbing thing on the planet. So why are you trying to make it so serious?
Why so serious?
Marvel executed comic book adaptations better than anyone else. Marvel was colorful, it was fun, it was interesting, it was exciting, and it appealed to all ages. Even the worst rated films in the early days of Marvel are still beloved today, and are at worst maybe a little boring. It seemed that Marvel wasn't going anywhere. So what happened? Like I said a moment ago, the failures of modern Marvel can be boiled down to just a few problems: quality, quantity, politics, and a lack of direction. First, quality. Quality speaks for itself. If a Marvel movie isn't written well, doesn't have good acting or good action and good special effects, it won't turn out well. The easiest way to illustrate this is just by looking at the special effects in the latest Marvel films. These are real shots from actual Marvel movies recently. This is embarrassing, and even the creators of the movies are acknowledging that it looks terrible.
Does that look real?
In that particular shot, no, actually.
Marvel CGI used to look like this, and now it looks like this. The worst part about it is it's not even the special effects artist's fault. Marvel's special effects team has had no break in years. There's always another project, and most of the time they're working on multiple at the same time. Marvel is stretching them so thin, and sooner or later they will break. Second, quantity. Like I just said, the sheer amount of Marvel projects lately is insane. This takes away from so much of the excitement that people used to get when they would hear that a new Marvel movie is releasing. Nowadays it feels like we hear that every other week. Third, politics. This is my personal biggest beef with modern Marvel. These are comic book movies. Movies where a super buff dude from space wears a cape, flies around with a big hammer, and walks on a rainbow road. How is this an environment where we need to include gender, race, and religion politics? Marvel keeps trying to shove female characters down the audience's throat until we accept that they are a part of the MCU. I don't freaking care about their gender! All I care about is the obvious lack of creativity or invention with these copy-paste female versions of beloved male characters from a few years ago. Just make new female characters! I love Scarlet Witch. I don't really mind Black Widow that much. I honestly thought that Miss Marvel was actually a pretty fun character, but she's literally just Captain Marvel again, but younger. There's no creativity in her character. You don't need to recreate exactly what we love about the male characters. I could go on for hours about this, but I genuinely do hate politics, and I hate them even more in movies. I'm here to shut my brain off for a few hours and get a few laughs in. If I want to be depressed, I can just turn on the news. Gen Z is an obvious target demographic in these projects, and Gen Z is one of the first generations to barely give two craps about politics. More and more as I go on in my life, I just grow in my hatred of politics, and putting them in movies that were a giant part of my childhood just makes me sad to see. You're actively making them the opposite of what I loved about them. You're making them an escape from bliss. Lastly, lack of direction. This is obvious. With the hundreds of delays on Marvel projects over the last few years and the TV shows that have been canceled or adapted or entirely changed, is getting insane. It's crazy how clear it is that Marvel has absolutely no plan or vision for its future. I was positive a lot in the last segment, but now I'm really gonna crack down on what I think of Marvel at the moment. I used to think Marvel could recover, and my original script actually had a little moment when I said I think they could recover. But the recent release of the Marvel's teaser trailer just confirmed Marvel is doomed. It's hard to say because Marvel has been such a special part of my life, but the cinematic aspect of Marvel is just doomed to fail. It's literally inevitable. Marvel is actively taunting its fan base in the background of trailers. Literally, look it up. It's actually a real thing. Marvel has gotten too cocky. It thinks that it doesn't need its fans. Marvel has taken its fan base for granted for far too long. And I hope that the naive Marvel fan base will finally realize that Marvel doesn't give a crap about them. I used to be one of those fans, but I've recently realized that Marvel doesn't care about me or my opinion, and on a mass level of fans, they care even less. This behavior is the reason Marvel will fail. I wish it would succeed. I want to see Marvel thrive again. I want to see Marvel care about its fans. I want to see Marvel last a long time. But sadly, the golden age is just long gone and replaced with a watered down echo of the fun and colorful spectacle it used to be. Politics have poisoned it, quality has ruined it, quantity has plagued it, and a lack of vision has doomed it. Will I still watch the Marvel movies? Of course. It's hard to ignore the incredible cultural significance that this genre has. And I'll always watch from a distance, hoping that it comes back to its former glory. I won't have the fun I used to seeing new Marvel movies, and I won't see as many as I used to, because Marvel has lost my respect. When I have kids one day, if these kinds of films are still
being produced by Marvel, I will genuinely lie to my kids and say that Marvel ended with Endgame. They'll be happier for it and will be shielded from the horrifying, disgusting truth of Marvel. As much as I wish this wasn't the reality, it is. And it's time for Marvel to be put out to pasture. It's time to look back and appreciate the good times. The joy of seeing Avengers pop up on screen. The excitement racing all over our bodies as we can't sit still for the movie to start. These kinds of memories I will always cherish. And I'm certain that they are memories I won't relive. Don't cry because it's over, but smile because it happened.